to our members in the community as we have gotten from shock to relief to now we're looking towards reopening so that we can recover. And as we do that, we'll be reimagining how we do business. So within that, several times a week, we've been able to have either council meetings or Fitness Friday or some other kind of educational programming. Well, this week kind of turned it on its head a little bit in that the governor announced the soft reopening of the state, so to speak, on May 4th that includes orders that take us into a partial phase one according to the White House guidelines. And with that, there's some modifications of the gating criteria that has restaurants doing some different things. It has gyms not open, bars not open, restaurants outside, but 25% inside. And it turns out that there were so many situations for a lot of our local businesses that were what we call uncontemplated. And that means I've got a special situation at my restaurant or my business, and it's not really addressed. So is it allowed or is it not allowed? And so we've got Jennifer Englert from the Orlando Law Group, who was kind enough to get on. She's reviewed all of these things and is going to try and the best we can address those issues for companies so that come Monday, May 4th, when all of us can do a little bit more with our businesses, we feel confident that we're adhering to the safety protocols that the healthcare professionals have put out for us. So as Rebecca said, from a bit of housekeeping, if you haven't used Zoom before, if you go down to the very bottom center of your panel that you have there, you will see a button that says chat. If you hit that, it'll blow out the right side, and you'll see all the resources that Rebecca said she was going to post, and you'll see chats to everybody. And so if you have a question and you're muted, it's a great place to just type it. You can send it privately to me or Rebecca or to everyone. Doesn't matter. We'll see it, or to Jennifer, and we'll try and address all those questions. So with that, thank you all very much for joining, and I will turn it over to Jennifer Englert. Oh boy, Jennifer's audio is off again. Uh-oh. So as dancing, as she figures this out, this is what we were having earlier is her computer.
Okay.
Yep, we can hear you now.
Oh, there we go.
All right.
Uh-oh.
Is that really echoey?
Yes, you'll.
Now we can't hear you again. Isn't technology fun?
Yep. I unmuted.
Okay, I'm muting you then.
There we go.
Okay, I'm switching laptops. Can you hear me now?
Turn that one off.
Yes, but it's very echoey, and so we'll have to turn off.
I'm turning the other one off.
Oh, there we go.
Good.
How's that?
Just
Perfect.
lock me out of that Zoom entirely. Click the X and turn that Zoom off. Leave the meeting.
Okay, how's that?
There we are. That's perfect.
Perfect. All right, but then you're muted. Okay, I can't hear. Oh shit. No, that's not how you do it.
You can go ahead and get started. We got it. Everybody else just is on mute, and you should be ready to go.
Oh, you're okay.
Yeah, that's muted. There you go.
Okay, how's that?
You're on.
Perfect. All right, now I can hear all of you. All right. That's why we have 3 laptops in here, people. This is going to work. Okay. So I know it's a super confusing time, and some of these orders have just made it more confusing. I've kind of read everything that's out there. I had already been reading everything that's out there so that we were kind of abreast of what to do with our business clients. I'm going to start with some very basic principles because other things are going to come up that we're not going to be able to address today. You're not even going to think that it's a problem until it's 9 o'clock Monday morning and you're like, ooh. So in general, when I have a client and I have to go to court for them, which hopefully will happen with none of the people on this list or any of my other clients, but the court is looking for a reasonable person standard. Now, I know that's kind of a funny thing for us to say in Florida or as human beings on this world, but when somebody tells me something, if I can go to a judge with a straight face and say, look, maybe you don't like the choice that they made, but they made this choice because X, Y, Z, and it makes sense, I almost always can get you out of whatever hot water you're in. So when you have a situation in front of you, and it might be a crazy customer that comes in, I think we're going to see all kinds of things that happen. People are stressed. They're going to be confused. Our employees are going to be confused. It's just going to be tough, but try to be reasonable and explain it reasonably. So that's like tip number one. Tip number two, the police might come to your door about something. It might be a competitor that calls, somebody that's angry, somebody that's confused, somebody that's driving by and has no idea what's happening in your business. They may come. Police do not want to be involved in this. They don't like what this would all be called civil matters. They don't want to be dealing with this, but they might come to you. Obviously, again, if you're reasonable and you explain what you're trying to do, explain to them what you're trying to do. Some of the executive orders, especially if you're a restaurant, a dental office, some of the ones that really have very specific things dealing with them, I'd have a copy of that order in your restaurant. I'd have it highlighted with what you think, what pertains to you. I'd go over it with your employees because you might not be there when the police officer comes. It might be a manager or somebody. It happens to be very close to 10 o'clock at night and you're not there. Just have it ready. And try to have a plan around it for those type of businesses. If you're not sure what to say or what to do, it sounds like people have been reaching out to Rebecca and Jason and chamber staff all day. Put it in the chat. I'll be checking our Facebook all weekend long and answering. There's going to be answers for you, but there's going to be times that there's just not. So have that order ready for you. Be consistent. So tip number 3 is be consistent. Whether it be how you're dealing with employees, how you're dealing with customers, especially if you're a gray area business, like you're a restaurant and you've got to figure out what that 25% capacity is. And it might be that one person put you over. So do you seat that party of 6 or not? Pick a way you want to deal with things and then consistently do them. I think we're already seeing, because I get all the emails of every lawsuit that's coming about all this COVID stuff, people are already going to complain, and they just are. That's the nature of the beast. We have clients and customers too. But however you decide to implement what you decide to implement, just do it the same. Because again, if I've got to go in front of a judge one day and say, oh, well, they did this, and you might not like why they did this, but look, they did it the same for everybody. So that's always doing it the same for everybody. A lot of this stuff, if you did this all the time, you wouldn't need me even in COVID times. So this advice kind of applies. Now, 4th tip, I know they showed the sign to put up in your window, the chamber. If they want to, I'm willing to share this as well. There are releases that you can do for your clients or customers to have them sign to try to protect you from liability for COVID. They're starting to come around already. Lawyers are writing them frantically, especially for hair salons, restaurants, some doctor's offices, especially like med spas and that sort of thing. Those all can't open right now, but we know they will soon. So if you're a business and you're a little bit nervous about the customers coming into your space, especially when you've got a lot of one-on-one contact with them, and we will be talking about some of those rules a little bit later on when I get into specifics, having them sign a release is a really good idea. Like I said, I'm happy to share a general one with the chamber that they could post. There's a little bit more specific ones, like I said, for hair salons and other things where that's contact, where basically the customer says, we all know the virus is out there. We all know it's contagious. We all know that everything, you could do 1,000 things and someone can still get it. So they're saying that they acknowledge that that's true. They know that, that you're not responsible if they get the virus. Now, is that the magic bullet that saves you from everything? Unfortunately, no. We sign releases every day in businesses and stuff. Smiling, yes. Gyms and a lot of places have assigned releases and they still get sued. If they're written right, it helps a whole lot. But at least it puts it out there in the universe that everybody's acknowledging that there's this risk. You've done everything you can for it. It still might happen. That gets back to the reasonable thing. I'm going to say to the judge, they did everything the same. They tried to clean. They told their customers, what more do you want from them? That's kind of the stuff that we're always trying to build. And now's a good time to get some of this stuff in place. Maybe you didn't have time to do it before, but it's good practice. So when things are a little bit slower, it's a good time to maybe get some of this stuff in place. Now, the next big thing is, and we've already had started talking about this, but your employees and when you can allow them to work. The order doesn't have a whole lot of guidance on that. It does talk about some of the protective things that you should do, but every business that has employees that is going to interact with the public, even if it's not super close one-to-one, you should put a policy in place. A lot of the stuff is just said, see the CDC guidelines. That's great, but none of us are physicians that should have to interpret all that. It's not easy. The executive order that was for restaurants, which is 2068. Again, this is when we could post out this stuff if we need to, if it's not already posted or easy to find. These are pretty easy to find, but we could put the links out. It has some guidelines for screening restaurant employees. Again, if you fall back on those and you say, look, I used what was for restaurant employees, that's a really good place to start. And it talks about needing 2 negative test results before you could come back to work if you did have a diagnosis. It talks about making sure that everybody, that if they have any of the signs and symptoms, and that list has grown, but the fever, the respiratory stuff that we already know about, making them go home. Obviously not letting people come in if they have contact with people who've had COVID. And people have been in traveling in airports. I think some of that's slowed down now. Some of this is a little like it's less relevant than it was, but it's good guidelines. And if you are doing stuff like taking temperatures and things, there's already a lot about maybe you should do that. I think in some businesses you probably should be doing that, and we could talk offline about that. That's something you could message me about. But if you are doing that or getting any medical information from your staff, I don't think you should be doing it from customers, but if you're a Medi Spa, you might end up doing that at some point. HIPAA guidelines still apply. Our medical information is private. That you get in trouble for sure if you pass that around. So come up with something over the weekend to see how you're going to protect that information. If you decide to take the temperature of all of your staff members, do it in a private place, write it down somewhere private, and keep that in a place in your computer or on your desk where other people can't see it. If you let them self-report, because some businesses are going to allow that, I don't think that that's necessarily wrong, but write that down in a place that you keep private. Because even the temperature of your employee the day they came and took it is private, and you don't want that getting out, because if you violate HIPAA, then they can come after you for that. And that's a pretty easy one to prove. It's pretty easy not to violate HIPAA, but you might not be thinking about that if you just have everybody lined up and you're running down the road with the temperature. Don't do that. But it's something you might not think about until it confronts you like this. Now, I think getting into some more particulars, and I'm sure probably most people know, but everybody might not know. What we're talking about is the new order that the governor came out with yesterday, which is -112, which is the new order that sort of pulled back the sheltering in place, and it's the phase 1. But then overlaid on that, Seminole County came out with some guidelines today, which Rebecca was sweet enough to send me this morning, so I did not have to find them. But then, of course, I think we all know that today, probably around 4 o'clock, Jerry Demings is going to come out with some for Orange County, and there's probably going to be some for Seminole or from Osceola County, because they tend to come out at the same time. We've seen how they've all been different, so that is an added layer of confusion. We're going to post that out. I know the chamber's going to post that out. Everybody's trying to keep informed, but in general, we have what the governor put forth. But any local government that you might be in or pass through that is more restrictive than what the governor did, you've got to follow where you are. Normally, law is not like this because it's super confusing, obviously, which is why we're having 5,000 webinars. But here it's how it is. We talked about, I know people are like, whether the First Amendment protects any of that, your rights and things, the right of the public health and all that, whether you agree with it or not under the law, that's going to trump our personal rights with some of these things, which is why they're doing things and then pulling back. We saw how Osceola wanted mandated masks, and then by Monday they said, oops, never mind, because they couldn't really do it the way they said. But some of these mask rules are going to apply. You might not be able to get the masks. So then we're into okay, the police comes to your door because you can't get the mask. What do I do? That's why we fall back on the kind of some of the original stuff that I was talking about at the beginning of the webinar. But most restrictive stuff applies. And we've got to be paying attention for people like me who have businesses in Orange and Seminole. What can I do with my Seminole people and what can I do with my Orange County people? Because it's going to be different. That adds another layer, which whatever rules you come up with, make sure you've got different rules for different counties, because most likely it's going to be different. I'd say probably for at least the next month. I don't think that we're all going to get on the same page for a while. So I'm going to talk about the Seminole County ones that are particular because we're in the Seminole County Chamber, but I'll point out the ones that kind of match together and that separate. And then I'll talk about the ones that just go to the whole state where Seminole didn't either become less or more restrictive. Now, in general, for all businesses, the ones that are allowed to be opened, we still have those essential businesses, yet another layer of complexity. I think everybody pretty much knows now what an essential business is. I know we might not agree with what the governor and what Miami said was an essential business, but that's what we're stuck with. All of those rules pretty much still apply. Some of this is extra on top of it, plus some additional businesses are allowed to open. Restaurants, which had to be closed, are now allowed to be opened, except inside 25% capacity. Outside, if they have outside seating, you don't have, the capacity isn't necessarily limited as long as you can deal with the social distancing rules that are required for pretty much everyone. Retail stores are also allowed to be open now at 25% capacity. Question one is, what is 25% capacity? Because I don't know. Some of us who fear math and percentages, and even those who don't, this is not an easy question. Every business is supposed to know what their capacity is, and it is really supposed to be posted somewhere in your business. The fire marshal does do that as part of the inspection. When you get your CO to open, restaurants and some businesses get those inspections all the time. Restaurants and seating stuff. If you're a restaurateur, you know this stuff. There's very specific rules about how many seats you're allowed to have, especially if you have alcohol, but it's just part of your restaurant license. If you don't know, I know people are probably calling the fire marshal like mad. I can only imagine the Seminole County Fire Marshal is not answering anymore. They're sure not answering this weekend. So see if you could go back and find some of that CO paperwork or something like that. Potentially you have it, you should have it. It might be in some of your insurance documents. It's something you probably need to know anyway. If push comes to shove and you really can't figure it out, then yes, probably the fire marshal has it on file somewhere. Maybe Rebecca can make a note about that because I know she's been talking to people, but try to find it somewhere where you're not calling them. Inside and outside, and in pretty much all areas where you're retail, you're supposed to have the 6-foot social distancing. So that's for Seminole County, that's for the state, for what the governor had to say as well. I would, again, figure out a way that you're going to measure that over the weekend or before you open for business, mark it on the floor. I think we've all been to Publix or Walmart or a couple of those places where now they have the spots where you can stand. Do that in your own business. Even if it's not perfect, you can show that you tried and you could explain how you tried to do it. And if you do it the same for all the way around, then you're not going to get the fines and the things. Nobody wants to do that anyway, but just make an attempt. Don't throw your hands up and say, I don't know how to do this. I don't know what my 25% is, so I'm just not. I call that like ostrich syndrome. Just don't be an ostrich. Just do something and try your best. Even if it's wrong, don't be an ostrich. That's good advice in almost everything. But so try that. You're probably going to have to provide guidance to your employees about what to do if they think more than 25, if it's getting more than 25% full. That's when you need to just communicate. I would be putting on my Facebook page, on my Instagram, any business that uses social media in any way. If you've got a website that you could use well enough that you could at least put like something up there. If you know how many, like if you're a retail store and you know, like you're a little boutique and you know you can only have 2 people in, say, look, we're opening. We can only have 2 people in, and that's it. Put it out there and communicate to your customers as quickly and as easily and as much as possible, because people are going to be excited. They're going to go out, and they're probably going to get mad when they can't get in your store or your restaurant. Should they have patience? Yes. Do we know that sometimes that doesn't happen? Yes. So communicate these guidelines, because some people are going to be clueless about them, and that is how it is. We know that. So knowing that you're going to have to do the 6 feet apart, knowing that you probably should mark it in some way for people so that they know, communicate how you're doing that so that they know, figure out what your 25% capacity is, communicate that to your employees so they know, to your customers so they know, and give everybody a plan for if people come in and it's more than 25%. Like I said, it's going to be that party of 6 when you could have 5 in and you'd be at 25%, but it's just one more. Oh, but it's just an 8-year-old. It's just my kid. It's okay. You gotta give your employees the tools to how to deal with that. It's not okay. I err on the side of being strict in this case because of potentially somebody reporting you, because of potentially if someone gets sick in your restaurant or your establishment and you want to try to get insurance coverage. Err on the side of caution here. Sometimes I don't say that. There's times I tell you as a lawyer, oh, you could push it a little. This is not the time to do that. So masks are another issue. Now, Seminole County has come out and said, to me, it looks like it's a little bit more, they're encouraging people to use masks. The government order, though, the order from the governor says, if you're in a business where you're going to have a lot of like one-to-one contact, both parties should wear a mask. So like when a hair salon's open again, for sure the person cutting the hair, the person doing the nails, the person giving the facial should have a mask. On the other side, the customer should have one too, unless it impedes what's happening. In a dentist, you can't have a mask on. If you're in a restaurant, the consumer client can't have a mask on. Everybody realizes that. But again, I'd be providing masks pretty much for every business there is, unless it's very easy to social distance. Even in the retail store, the requirements are that you have the 6-foot social distancing, or at a minimum, there's a mask. I think we're seeing the plexiglass already up in Publix and other places. Neither the Seminole County nor the governor says anything about those barriers or plexiglass. I think that's probably one of the ways you could promote the social distancing or make sure it happens. But if I had a retail store and I had my client wear a mask, I'd probably try the plexiglass too, because the added layer of trying to increase the likelihood that your insurance will cover you in case something happens, the more you put in place, the better. You are allowed to, again, like you could have the check for the Seminole County order says that you can do the staging areas, you can do queues, you can do all those things, but you have to have the 6-foot distance, and it does ask you to mark floors or do something similar to show where the 6-foot distance is. So again, Seminole County actually just came out and gave some better instruction and better filling out, I think, of what the governor already did. And if you don't have that order and you're in Seminole County, you have to have it in your hands. The order doesn't apply to things like first responders, healthcare workers, veterinarians, shelter staff, childcare workers, things that kind of already were exempt under the original shelter-in-place order. But again, if you're on the kind of the bubble of that, like I said, the Medi Spa, some things may or may not be a healthcare or medical worker. Those people, I'd probably chat with your attorney or maybe get a little bit more, maybe your insurance agent even, to get a little more guidelines of whether you really fall under that stuff. And maybe some of those would be the questions that we're getting asked. No more than 10 people at any public space. That pretty much is across the board as well. If your business has more than 10 people, factories, some other places, we've already been dealing with that even in some of our offices. As long as they can social distance, if there's barriers, we've got cubicles, it's pretty easy to spread people out. That's still okay too. So those are some of the things that we need to be concerned about. Restaurants has a whole lot of requirements. All of the other orders regarding restaurants still apply to the extent that they're more restrictive and or allow more things. So restaurants are still allowed to sell those to-go alcoholic drinks. Restaurants / bars, you have to be able to sell at least 50% of your revenue has to come from food. Again, if you're a bar restaurant, you have these numbers down because it's part of you being licensed with the DVPR, but you're not allowed to open if you're a bar. If you're a bar that sells potato chips, don't try to pretend that suddenly you're a restaurant, because you're not. Those are the people who probably will get shut down. Jason's seen all this, that's like that. But yeah, you're not, and you're not gonna fool anyone. You don't fool anyone anyway normally, because there's reasons for these rules, and if you're in the restaurant business, you know exactly why they exist. But especially now, I mean, if I had a restaurant, I'd be super cognizant of that, because if the police are gonna come anywhere, it probably is a restaurant that sells alcohol. I'd be the most concerned if I was that. So bars, no. Restaurants have to have at least 50% food. Bars or restaurants with bars, like a bar is part of the restaurant, you can't open that. You can't have people sitting at the bar. Now, I know it's already come up. If you have a restaurant that has like amusements, you might have a restaurant with like 3 of those, like the basketball hoops, like a Dave and Buster's kind of place. But even a lot of places have that without, like Gators. There's many restaurants that have a little bit of amusement stuff in there. That definitely is in the gray area. I would err on the side of caution there. You might be able to have some of that open. Personally, I probably wouldn't, because if somebody does get sick in your restaurant and they were there, they are going to blame that piece of equipment. Now, if you could have an attendant stand there and wipe it down every time, and you make sure nobody gets 6 feet, I just wouldn't do it. I think it's in the too hard pile. If they don't want people sitting at a bar stool next to each other, or even 6 feet apart, even that is not allowed. I don't think having somebody sit at those like multiple, the one that I could think of really close together is like a basketball machine or something like that. Just don't do it. If you have 1 or 2 and they're far apart or on their opposite ends of the restaurant and you want to try, I doubt the revenue's worth it. But if you have somebody who can make sure that it's cleaned every time, then you could think about it, but it's probably just not worth it. Even if you've got like a vending machine in your restaurant or your place of business, that's another thing to think about. I'd be thinking about how you're going to clean that too. There's not a whole lot in here about how to clean and what you should be doing to clean in any of these. They've left that super gray, probably because nobody wants to go on record saying how to do it. But I mean, again, that comes back to the reasonable person standard. If it was like your 2-year-old, would you want your 2-year-old to touch whatever it was about to be touched? I kind of use that as my standard. My kids are a little bit older, but if you wouldn't want your 2-year-old touching it in your place of business, you probably don't want it open, or you need to change things. So I'm making new rules as we go. But yeah, I'd say the 2-year-old rule. That's going to be my new rule for this. If you don't, but there's not a whole lot of guidelines about that anywhere that I've seen, and that makes it tough on everybody. If you have a business that's a high liability business, besides talking to an attorney, you might want to talk to your insurance agent to see if they have any ideas about that whole worrying about insurance coverage. And also, if you have one of those releases that you have your client sign, some of those risks and stuff could be specifically mentioned, depending on what your business is. And I think for some, it makes a whole lot of difference, and you're going to need to see it there. Gyms aren't allowed to be open. Vacation rentals aren't allowed to be open. There's a lot of rules about vacation rentals. I think they kind of made that even more restrictive now, because originally we were kind of in that 30-day limbo. You might have already had people in your rental that were in there, and you had to let them kind of stay and finish their visit. I've had a lot of clients doing that. If you're in the vacation rental business, it really does say you shouldn't even be renting them anymore. We don't know when they'll reopen. I've got a lot of concerns about that. So that's probably something where you should get a little bit of extra advice, especially here in Florida. It makes a whole lot of difference, and in Central Florida. Believe it or not, museums and libraries could stay open at 25%. I don't know where that's going to happen or how that's going to happen. There are some additional rules to that, but if you're somebody going crazy with the kids in the house and you finally want to get them out, again, I would check before you go. I think a lot of places still won't be open. And if you are a business that is one of those, usually those are nonprofits, but again, they'll probably start opening some amusements part of the way. Reasonable person standard and getting rules that apply to everybody. Medical is allowed to reopen, stuff that was either elective or wasn't open before. There are a lot of rules in there about your PPE, that protective equipment, and how you can't be asking for, you can't open without it and then ask for help to buy it. So again, if you don't have everything ready to open, you don't want to preclude yourself later from being able to get aid or money. We all kind of probably went through the PPP loan roller coaster. They changed the rules in the middle a little bit. So again, err on the side of caution. But I think that pretty much goes over the general gist of the businesses and who can open and who can't open. I know there's going to be a whole lot of other questions that we probably don't even think of today. But is there anything in the chat that we should talk about, Rebecca?
I can chime in. There was a couple of good things here, but I think what's also important in the balance here is I have the benefit of not being your attorney or an attorney on the phone. And so if there is some gray area or some uncontemplated stuff, I can help frame it in what I believe the way it was intended, so that if it is a coin flip and it is uncontemplated, there are ways that we can think about some of these unknown things. I'll read a couple of these questions in the chat. For Jennifer, see if we will. One of the things, the Secretary of the Department of Business and Professional Regulation was on with the Orange County Task Force this morning and pointed out critically for restaurants that employees are not calculated in your 25%. So I certainly hope nobody's in the business of going around counting people in a restaurant to tattle on them. But if you happen to get a little nervous and think there's too many people, don't count anybody with a name tag on. They are not part of that calculation. Additionally, the OBJ said that restaurateurs, we're encouraging folks to do some more outside seating. And so if you had space on the sidewalk or were able to do that, those of you who are sticklers for the rules may think, and Chairman Horan maybe, who is on, may have an opinion on this, but the County Commission has said this week that they want to make sure that they're doing everything they can to help businesses. And that may mean suspension of what would normally need a permit for outside dining. And so check with the county to see if they don't mind that maybe you take up a parking space or some sidewalk so that you can have access to that. Michelle had a great question. And I have an opinion on this, but Jennifer, please chime in. I know a hair salon is trying to book customers for this weekend. Are they at risk for fines or licensure issues?
All of the above. Whoever that is, if that is your friend, please call them and tell them not to do that. It could not be more clear that you are not allowed to do that. Not allowed to do that. Now, I did say, I don't know, is Jason, do we match?
Nope.
You think we can?
No, I do agree that they are at risk for fines and licensure suspension. That is very clear, yes.
Okay, well, I mean, there is one caveat. If they are a retail store, which some places do have retail in the front, potentially they could say they were open for that purpose, and that they were selling shampoo and stuff like that. And I mean, like an Ulta that has in the back the hair salon, they certainly could be open at 25% capacity, and then be able to sell their retail stuff. So one other thing I want to say about if you're having people eat outside in parking spaces and things, my lawyer heart would die if I didn't tell you, please mark off what you're doing. Please use caution tape or cones or something, because even though you would think it might be very obvious if you put a table in the middle of the area that a car might be at some point, you will get in trouble if something happens. I mean, there is a potential claim. So just be super clear about what you're doing with whatever safety precaution you can, even if it appears so obvious that it's obvious. Just don't assume that somebody might not see that table, and please use some cones and caution.
Yes. So my quick view on this is that part of the governor's order had in it the 8 guiding principles by which these orders were meant to be observed. And one of them was protection of civil liberties and maintaining individual rights. And that guiding principle was meant that when restrictive measures are imposed, they should be done by the, let's get the language right, least restrictive measures feasible to accomplish a specific medically necessary objective. Should somebody hassle you for getting your hair cut and you're both wearing gloves and you're both wearing masks, you could make the argument, am I safer in a Target with 100 people not wearing masks, or here with one other person and we're all wearing masks? So that's where I think there's kind of a gray area that is, and I think it's going to open relatively quickly soon. Okay. Next question.
Non-lawyer Jennifer might agree with you, Jason, just saying, but anyway.
I don't know if you guys have noticed, but I got a little high and tight earlier this week, but my guy works out of his house, so I was technically not violating the rules because he does not have his own setup. So Larry said his workers' comp folks are making a recommendation that they raise their liability from $500,000 to $1 million per instance. Is by doing so, is he inviting a lawsuit?
You are not, because workers' comp, I mean, workers' comp is no liability anyway. If somebody gets sick in one of your workers gets sick, they're probably going to file a claim. And so it doesn't matter what your coverage is or whether you're at fault or not, it's no fault. Workers' comp is no fault. So at least that's one of the easier things. I would ask your agent though, if you're to ensure that there's not going to be some kind of coverage exclusion for this virus. This is weird, so I do have a little bit of a concern that your comps might say, oh, well, we're not covering it. So see, I might think about raising my premium, because it's going to raise your premium a good bit, I'm quite sure. So one, making sure that the virus will be covered, or two, can you get some kind of rider so that it's not up to a full million, because then everything's a million, and that premium, I'm not sure what your business is, but that premium is going to be huge. Can you maybe just get a rider for the virus or for a certain amount of time period so that it doesn't bump up your whole rate for everything? I don't think I'd do it, quite honestly, because I don't think you would need to, unless at a minimum you've got the assurance that the virus would be covered, and maybe that you do some kind of rider that the extra amounts just for COVID stuff and not just for anything. That's
Larry's not in construction, but we have seen from a chamber level businesses having trouble when trying to access business interruption insurance. The insurance companies are saying, well, this isn't exactly act of God, because we do have a provision in here about viruses and bacteria, and they're having a tougher time getting paid anyway. So why pay the additional premium if you don't have a specific rider that allows for this? Okay, very good. Christina just wanted to verify Seminole County libraries are opening. Are they?
They're certainly allowed to.
We have not seen them announce that they are opening, but they can open. I have not seen any announcements that they are open. Just like state parks are allowed to open this weekend, but city parks don't necessarily have to open. So they're allowed to, but I have not seen anything yet.
Next question. Karen's asking how the restaurants are handling the lack of supplies available, masks, hand sanitizers on the tables, about opening on Monday. And I think I've got some opinions there as well. Jennifer, how would you handle that as the attorney?
Well, I mean, I certainly want to document every effort that you could make, that you make to try to get them. I think something's better than nothing. I wouldn't fail to open because it doesn't say N95 masks, it says masks. So if somebody can make something, if you could do whatever you can do to at least do the covering, I would open as long as you're making an effort. On the flip side, I know that there's plenty of that stuff around. Some of it just might be a little bit difficult to get. If you want to message my personal Facebook page or the Orlando Law Group Facebook page, I know where to get some, and my friends are covered. But I would open, just show that you try to comply with the spirit of it. And I think there's enough ways to do it. We all saw how to make it out of a sock and all that. Who hasn't watched 20 YouTube videos on how to make a mask out of weird things?
And that's perfect. I think the principle from the governor, one of those guiding principles was public health and safety was number one. And so I think from a consumer standpoint, if you don't feel like the restaurant has taken appropriate precautions or has enough PPEs, whether it be hand sanitizer or their staff's not masked, et cetera, don't go. Just stay out of that area. Alan rightly pointed out, no restriction on the number of customers in a parking lot as long as social distancing applies. And I think that applies to Larry's question about the food trucks in the neighborhood. As long as everybody's separated, that should be fine as well. Amy asks, is there anything in any of the orders that an office building should do when opening up regarding cleaning of common areas, signage, etc.?
Yeah, and there really isn't anywhere, which is kind of shocking. But I've not seen any guidelines in any of this about how to clean and what is the appropriate cleaning. I think that's because nobody knows and nobody wants to go on record saying it. That's why I would just come up with something that makes sense for your business. Some things might need it more than others, and then say, this is how we do it. Write it down on a piece of paper, show it to your employees. If some employee doesn't do it, God forbid, at least you show you tried. And you kind of just have to be what's reasonable. If you, if you have a business that's at high risk, there are places that are doing it very institutional wise, obviously medical offices and stuff. You can't just be saying, oh, I tried to use some Lysol. But like Truly Nolan, I know like everybody knows Truly Nolan. They've switched to that. They have a product there, and that once you spray some of the products you can spray does protect for a certain amount of time. You're then also offloading the liability on that other company. There are UV lights and things that work in restaurants. There are a lot of things that you might not know about that probably if we ask a couple questions might make it easier. I just happen to now know about it. Probably Jason and we're all becoming experts in that stuff. So maybe ask around a little bit. It might be easier than you think.
Yeah, buried in the Phase 1 White House document recommendations for employers, bullet 8, it says you should probably just close common areas. Is it like if you're worried about it, is that don't have a lunchroom, don't have try only one person in the copy room at a time, that sort of thing, just to be safe. Let's see. Other than social distancing and 50% capacity, are there any Seminole County requirements for large office cubicle environments to open? An example would be a call center or a sales site or something where you have like a bullpen with a ton of folks in the area.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I drove past Lucas Nursery.
Yeah,
My
We might want to mute.
God, across the street.
were they really?
Jeff McCubbin, are you on mute? Let's see. Nope, we got it. We're all muted up. That wasn't it. All right, Jennifer. Things for both cubicles.
Yeah, and that was just, in Seminole County, as long as you could do the 6 feet distance. Now, I think if you've got a cubicle and you're not quite 6 feet, I think you're fine. I mean, we have cubicles in my office. Don't call me in, but we're not 6 feet, but they're within it. There's a 1 foot wall in between them. I think that's fine. It's more, again, if it's a reasonable attempt to make social distancing / safety, I think you're fine.
And Chairman Horan asking, has anyone seen any good info on sanitation on your premises, or has anyone seen anything from an insurer that will address best practices for opening? Jennifer, before you answer, one of the things that we have done with the chamber thing that we pointed out earlier at the top is we've got a checklist of 5 or 6 things that are basic. It's not guaranteed, but it's in line with all the recommendations. It says we have a disinfection and sanitation plan, whatever that is for your business. We observe physical distancing measures. We have protective gear such as masks and gloves and barriers. We have employee training on the COVID plan. Jennifer mentioned very clearly, communicate early and often as to what it is for everybody. And potentially we have on here temperature and symptom checks on employees. That's one thing that should be relatively obvious, that if somebody looks like they're symptomatic, send them home. But if you have that posted at the front of your business, that this is all the stuff that we do for sanitation, anybody that then wants to ask further can. But I don't know if there's an insurance company or a legal way that I guess you, Jennifer, mentioned having everyone sign a rider that says they understand the plan and take all full risk and responsibility. Is there anything additional than that?
No, I mean, there are some products out there. There are some companies that now have stuff that they could come in and spray and clean with a guarantee for a certain number of weeks. If your machinery, I mean, there's some times where you might need that, then they would take the liability, which would be great if you could afford it, or if it's just like a necessary evil in your business. The UV lights too, they're actually not that expensive, and some of them, I know the insurance companies like those. I think anything more than just like every hour Lysoling, that's probably not going to get you very far, although everybody should do that. If you're a higher risk business, you probably need to go to the next level. And if you are retaining somebody to come in and do the cleaning for you, then you could at least potentially put off liability onto them, which if you're a cleaning company on this, I'm sorry, but you know what you signed up for. Otherwise, yeah, your insurance company is going to love that you hired a company to do that if you can, and it makes sense. And some places are going to need to really be safe.
Perfect. And then Larry from Evoke said that they have a 3-stage approach to reopening. If anybody wants it, we can send that to Rebecca, and Rebecca can send that out to anybody who wants it if they're curious about what other businesses might be doing, so that we are indeed are not reinventing the wheel. Any other questions for Jennifer as we go forward here? This has been fantastic. I think everybody's really enjoyed getting at least the idea that people are going to be open again. Maybe somebody could go have a margarita at a restaurant, not a bar.
That's right. Have tacos
right.
with it, not just chips.
Yeah, if you go into Chili's, you will not be allowed in the bar area. You will be allowed in the restaurant area. All right. Well, thank you all very much for being here. Thank you so much, Jennifer Englert, from the Orlando Law Group for doing this today. If you have any questions, if they come up over the weekend, as has been noticed by a lot of people, there are no more boundaries, and so email anytime. We are all kind of working all the time, and so yeah. Missy said, "What a waste of Cinco de Mayo on Taco Tuesday, caused by
Ryan, I'm on a now. Can I
right?
give you a call?
It could have been fantastic." Well, thanks to everybody for joining, and we really appreciate it. And if there's anything else we can do or any other information we need, please feel free to email Jennifer. And if you don't have her stuff, email Rebecca or myself, and we will make sure we get it to her. Have a safe weekend, and we'll see some of you out there on Monday.
Have a good one. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.